You are listening to Love Bits, Episode 5, Cliche. The blue strobe softened to pale threads across the glass lobby as morning stretched over lower Manhattan. The bank smelled of wet wool and printer toner, of rain burned off marble by the breath of a city already late. A dozen shoe prints overlapped in the foyer, panic pressed into geometry, while a trembling branch manager whispered the detail everyone would repeat. 3 robbers in masks from the 1980s, a trinity of fame: Robert De Niro's wry half-smile, Harrison Ford's heroic squint, Jack Nicholson's dangerous grin, ghosting through the security footage like the past staging a comeback. Roger Starks took it in with the disciplined patience of a man who'd learned not to rush the truth. His gaze skimmed camera arcs, exit angles, the way the sky bridge outside threw a shadow shaped like a second hand. Becky Lee worked the room in soft-soled steps, notebook open, pen ready, eyes bright despite the night she'd ridden bareback toward deadline. With dry composure that let warmth peek through, his voice dropped to her shoulder. "You must be a bank loan," he said, the corners of his mouth betraying him, "because you've got my interest." With amused restraint that shaded toward pleased, she didn't look up right away. She finished a note, then angled him a sidelong smile. "Smooth, detective." He lifted a hand as if to surrender to his own corny momentum, eyes sparking. "Is your hotspot on?" "I'm feeling a connection." With a small shake of her head that couldn't hide the grin, she countered, "Flattery will get you coffee." Outside, the street exhaled cinnamon from a chestnut cart. Rain beaded the caution tape and fell in bright, precise commas. Roger led the way toward his unmarked sedan. When he popped the trunk for a kit bag, Becky's attention snagged on a pristine chrome and black boombox sitting like a trophy in the corner, VU meters asleep, cassette door polished to a mirror. With delighted surprise tempered by professional cool, she ran a knuckle along the handle. "That's mint." With boyish pride warming through his detective steel, he shrugged. "Restored it," he said. "Cassettes sound like memory behaving itself." With a soft laugh that carried recognition, she tipped her head toward the back seat. "Keep talking. I'm listening." They cut over 2 blocks to a corner cafe that gathered the morning crowds into its warm breath. The bell chimed, the door sighed, and fresh grind aroma wrapped around them. At the register, they turned without planning and spoke at the same time, perfectly in sync. With amused astonishment, both of them said, "Large oat milk latte, 2 pumps vanilla, 1 pump caramel, extra hot, ristretto shots, no foam." Amir, the barista, blinked once, then twice, lips tugging a grin as he keyed it in. Roger leaned an elbow on the counter, irresistibly incorrigible. With playful seriousness, his voice pitched just loud enough for the person across the bar to hear, he added, "Are you a parking ticket? 'Cause you've got fine written all over you." Amir, within easy arm's reach as he slid the cups down, deadpanned without missing a beat. "That line'll cost you extra, E for effort surcharge." With mock offense and visible delight duking it out in her eyes, Becky accepted her cup. The cardboard sleeve rasped against her palm. She started toward the sugar station. Roger followed close enough that their shoulders brushed. With companionable quiet, they reached for the cinnamon shaker together, fingers colliding lightly. A tremor of laughter spilled out of both, small and stupidly satisfying. With a contented grin that told on him, he murmured, "If I could rearrange the alphabet, I'd put you and I together." The woman elbow to elbow at the sugar station, close enough to read the name on his badge, smirked over her lid. "I just got a cavity." Becky hid a smile behind her cup. A droplet of latte slid toward the rim as someone bumped her from behind. The cardboard flexed. Roger caught the cup with a steadying hand, the liquid shivering but staying put. With unshowy tenderness that felt like muscle memory from a future they hadn't lived yet, he said, "I've got you." With a warming glance that let a compliment land, she breathed, "And you also have my interest, by the way." They drifted to the high top by the window, where the city flickered past in slats of rain and yellow cabs. Roger slid a napkin across the wood, his handwriting angled neat and unhurried, his number, and beneath it a flourish of a note. For the record, coffee, then the stars. With conspiratorial spark, Becky pulled a pen from behind her ear, flipped a second napkin, and began a quick song list in tidy, confident script. Side A. Against all odds. Time after time. Take my breath away. Side B. In your eyes. I want to know what love is. Drive. She pushed it back to him with 2 fingers. With pleased mischief, her voice low enough to keep the moment theirs, she said, "Consider it a promise. Cassette incoming." He studied the napkin like a clue he'd rather keep than log. Outside, a garbage truck hissed, a bus shouldered into the curb, a cyclist shook rain from his jacket and grinned at nothing. With a crooked smile that meant he knew exactly how ridiculous he sounded and didn't mind, Roger leaned in 1 last inch. "I must be a snowflake," he said, "because I've fallen for you." With a soft, incredulous laugh that accepted the game and the man playing it, she let the moment breathe, then tapped her cup to his. "Coffee now," she said, business returning to her posture without evicting the glow. "Then records. We map those pop-up leases. We map their staging points." He nodded, the detective returning to the front row of his eyes. "And when they time their next move to a crowd," he said, glancing toward the window where the sky bridge cut its slender shadow, "we'll be where they don't expect anyone to be looking." They stood. The door chimed. The city's breath met them again at the threshold, warm and damp, and already asking too many things of too many people. Becky tucked the napkin with his number into her notebook. Roger folded the song list and slid it into his pocket like a talisman. Outside, a bus splashed through a shallow river that used to be a crosswalk. The day clicked into gear. With the conspiratorial courage of a first date that pretends it isn't one, they stepped into the weather as a unit. 2 cups, 2 plans, 1 ridiculous, shining willingness to say the lines everyone knew and mean them anyway. The municipal records office hummed with fluorescent fatigue and the papery smell of old decisions. Pens were leashed to counters. A wall clock clicked in stern, civic seconds. Becky stood at the glass, forms clipped under one palm, while Roger hovered close enough that the ghost of his cologne floated between them like an admission the air had decided to keep. With a spark in her eyes and a smile she tried to keep professional, Becky slid the paperwork through the slot. "Do you believe in fate?" With fond deadpan that couldn't hide respect, Roger angled closer to read the clerk's screen. "I believe in your boxes and arrows." From 2 feet away, the clerk pushed her glasses up with a practiced sigh. "I believe in exact addresses." She stamped, slid. 3 pop-up leases, 12-week terms, 1 registered agent repeating like a tell. They stepped back into the hard noon of Lower Manhattan. The glass of the bank across the street threw the city back at itself in a slick, continuous loop. That's when Becky saw it, a flash of grin that wasn't the sun. The Jack Nicholson mask rode the reflection like a dare, shouldering past commuters toward Fulton Street Station. "Mask," she said, voice clipped and sure. They moved. Sirens were elsewhere today. Their soundtrack was footfalls, breath, a tourist's suitcase wheels warbling over a crack in the pavement. The stairs into the AC station breathed heat that tasted like iron and old rain. Turnstiles crowded the entrance. The stars slipped through, fluid, practiced. Roger threw a glance to the attendant's booth. Becky had her Metro card out already, the choreography of a city native. With a sharp grin that felt like game on, Roger cut his hand toward the gate. "Us against the world." "Always go," Becky shot back, sliding her card, hip-checking through. The turnstile attendant, close enough to count their heartbeats, leaned toward the microphone. "It's us against holding the doors. Keep 'em clear." The gate buzzed. A metal arm thumped Roger's thigh as he shoved through on her heels. They pounded down the final stairs as the chimes sang. The train's doors tromboned their warning. The platform wind lifted jackets and scattered yesterday's news. One of the stars, Nicholson Grin, stepped into the last car without haste, as if he had invented time and could extend it at will. Becky vaulted the last rise, hair catching a light blade. They hit the platform as the doors began to close. Roger wedged an arm in. The rubber stuttered. The conductor barked. The doors surrendered. They poured into the last car, bodies flooding around bodies, the city mixing its chemicals to see what happened next. The car smelled of damp coats, hot brakes, a strawberry hint from someone's gum. Roger threaded the crush, one hand skating along the slick bar over the seats. Becky hooked her fingers into the back of his jacket so they wouldn't get separated by the tide. The Nicholson mask glanced up into its own reflection in the window, the grin flattening into menace, then slipped between two passengers and out the middle doors as the train sighed into High Street, Brooklyn. The platform there was a throat clearing from the river, a cool exhale. Roger and Becky spilled after him. They followed through the underpass where tile made everything echo, up a stairwell where grit bit into shoe rubber, then out into the slap of sun and traffic at Cadman Plaza. The masked man cut right, then left, then dove for a service alley that smelled like fryer oil and damp cardboard. A second star, Harrison Ford Squint, appeared in their periphery and peeled off toward Court Street. The lane flattened into a ramp back to street level. "If you jump, I jump," Becky laughed, breath burning sweet in her throat as she cleared the final lip. "With you, right," Roger answered, matching her pivot. The cyclist who'd cut across the mouth of the alley yanked both brakes, stopping so close Becky could read the brand on his glove. "If you jump, jump into a bike lane," he repeated, but his mouth twitched like he was rooting for them anyway. The Nicholson mask vanished behind a delivery truck. When they rounded it, the sidewalk divided them from their target by a knot of pedestrians coagulated around a busker juggling knives. The blades flashed, the crowd oohed. The star slipped the gap and was gone. They decelerated under an awning that smelled like oranges and dish soap. A patrol car chirped somewhere behind them. Its echo never quite arrived. Roger braced a forearm against the cool brick of the building. Becky rested the heel of her hand on the same brick, shoulder to shoulder, their breath gusting white in the shadowed heat of the day. With his chest heaving and a grin he didn't bother to hide, Roger swallowed and found her eyes. "You make me a better person." With a quick, crooked smile that glowed without apology, Becky bumped his shoulder with hers. "Then keep up." A uniformed cop funneling foot traffic around a pothole 2 steps away flicked a glance at them. "Flirt later. Move now," he said, gesturing them back into the flow. They moved, slowed, moved again, this time toward the nearest precinct where Dina was already assembling their next angle, the map tightening. As they walked, Becky's hand brushed the locket at her throat, as if verifying it had earned its place. Roger touched the folded napkin of her song list in his pocket, like a superstition he'd decided to keep. The chase had not given them an arrest, but it had given them shape. The route under the river, the way the stars used a crowd's curiosity as cover, the flicker of a mask choosing its reflection with narcissist precision. It also gave them what it always did when they ran together, velocity that felt like a single organism. They didn't say it aloud, not here, but the line had already started to live in the muscle, us against the world. The newsroom throbbed with the caffeinated percussion of keyboards and deadlines. Fluorescents hummed like anxious bees. Becky stood at her desk triaging tips when a shadow fell across the copy she was marking. Roger materialized with the sheepish bravado of a man fully aware of what he was holding, a dozen long-stemmed red roses wrapped in cellophane that crackled like a tiny storm. With playful self-awareness softening his voice, he set the bouquet down. "For evidence that I can read a room badly and still mean well." With delighted mortification brightening her cheeks, Becky covered a smile with the back of her hand. "You're impossible." From 3 feet away, Margot, her editor, lifted a red pen without looking up, tone dry as copy paper. Thorns near copy and someone's getting reassigned. She glanced over the lenses. They're pretty. File the story, water the plants, in that order. With a guilty grin surrender, Roger raised both palms. Message received. He pointed at his watch, eyes dancing. Stakeout, 2000. Bring your skepticism, and maybe an appetite. Night pressed against the windshield like velvet, rain beginning to embroider the glass with fine silver stitches. The sedan idled 2 doors down from a pop-up storefront, lights off, shade drawn, the kind of empty that listened hard. The air inside the car carried peppermint from Becky's gum, coffee from the cup holders, and the metallic hint of wet fabric slowly surrendering. With conspiratorial cheer, Becky dug in her tote and produced a heart-shaped box of chocolates that gleamed like a Valentine's prop discovered in a prop warehouse. For morale, she said, popping the lid with a flourish to reveal tidy rows crowned by frilly paper cups. With grateful amusement warming his words, Roger accepted a truffle. This is the most forensic thing we've done all day, he said, biting into caramel as if gathering fingerprint powder. With a pleased little flourish, she slid something else across the console, a clear cassette in a crackle-free case, label handwritten in neat blue ink, "For Us, Side A/Side B." Fulfillment of earlier contract, she said, chin tipping toward the folded napkin peeking from his pocket. With boyish reverence, he turned it in his fingers to admire the track list. Side A, Time After Time, Against All Odds, Drive. Side B, In Your Eyes, I Want to Know What Love Is, bonus track, Crazy for You. You're trying to kill me. With a soft laugh, her eyes bright in the dashboard glow, she nudged his knee. Or calibrate you. Your boombox is invited to the listening party. With mock indignant pride, he patted the back seat where a blanket hid the chrome silhouette. Cleaned the heads, demagnetized, new belts, he said. She purrs. Rain thickened, turning streetlights into halos. Across the block, a door creaked in the dark and closed again. Nothing. The city stretched, yawned, pulled a cloud blanket higher. With a quieter tone that let a truth tiptoe in, Becky watched a rivulet race a rival down the glass. I can't explain it. I just know, she said, as if attempting to label a specimen that kept refusing taxonomy. With steady warmth, he kept his eyes on the storefront and let the words answer without drama. Same. A burst of rain drummed, harder now. They gave the wipers a break and stepped out, hoods up, to stretch cramped legs. The sidewalk smelled like wet stone and the kind of soap cheap restaurants use because it holds the memory of lemons. Water-needled roofs and shoulders. A street vendor rolled an umbrella cart under the awning and parked himself a foot from where they hovered. With salesman's patience and a wink, the vendor, close enough to hand them a handle, lifted a canopy in demonstration. $5, unless you're committed to the rain thing. With mock solemn bravado, Roger squared his shoulders to the weather. We're meant to be, he declared, clearly performing for Becky and probably for himself. With impish delight that sparkled in her voice, Becky elbowed him. You had me at hello, she said, allowing the callback to land soft and easy. The vendor snorted, amused, and pushed a compact umbrella into Roger's hands anyway. Consider this witness protection for your hair, he said, already counting change for another soaked couple. They walked the block and back, umbrella a small comic tent. At the corner, sirens dopplered some other story into the distance. A patrol cruiser rolled past slow. The officer inside braked just long enough to lean out the window and wag 2 fingers at the umbrella from a car length away. Keep it moving. Sidewalks for traffic, not sonnets, he said, grin audible. With a mock salute, Roger shepherded Becky back to the car. They slid in, damp and laughing. The chocolates endured bravely. A text from Dina pinged, Nothing yet, stay warm. With gentle mischief, Becky lifted another truffle to his lips. Nutritional support, she said. With affectionate surrender, he bit, eyes crinkling. You are dangerous. With breezy certainty that did not ask permission, she rested her head lightly against his shoulder. I know, she said. You're safe. Across the street, nothing moved. Inside the car, something did. A quiet rearrangement of comfort, a small handoff from banter to belief. Outside, the rain steadied into a rhythm that could have been a metronome if you wanted your life scored in 6/8 time. With low, content conviction, Roger let the sentence arrive in his chest, ready and unpretentious. We're meant to be, he repeated, not louder this time, just truer. With a soft exhale that carried both laughter and agreement, Becky didn't argue. She only pressed the cassette case into his palm and closed his fingers around it until the click of plastic against his wedding-thick knuckles felt like a seal. They settled back into the watch. On the console, the empty chocolate cups made a tidy little graveyard. On the seat, the cassette waited like a promise they fully intended to keep. And across the way, behind a shade that tried to pretend it was nobody's business, the city breathed and prepared its next test. The street festival unfurled along the avenues like confetti learning to breathe, banners snapping, food carts steaming sugar into the night, a cover band leaning into an 80s power ballad that made strangers sway as if nostalgia could choreograph feet. The Ferris-wheel turned at the end of the block, cabins rising and lowering in patient circles, its bulbs stippling the dark like a simple constellation. Roger and Becky slipped through a seam in the crowd, eyes working the edges, ears filtering the city's loud grammar for the single verb that didn't belong. With tactical calm edged by excitement, Becky tipped her chin toward the skyward spokes. We'll see the whole field. With a breath that caught despite himself, equal parts altitude and her, Roger nodded. Let's do it. The ride operator lifted the bar with a wrestler's ease and waved them into a red car. The bench was still warm from the last pair of giddy teenagers. The latch thunked. The wheel groaned a friendly promise and lifted them. Below, the festival thinned into patterns, service roads, pop-up tents, a van idling where it shouldn't, its magnetic logo trying too hard to blend. With awe he didn't bother hiding, and an affection that made the night tilt brighter, Roger let the words escape. My heart skips a beat when I see you. Leaning into the car doorway as he checked the bar, the ride operator, close enough to see their faces and smell the kettle corn on their coats, arched a single eyebrow. Mine does when people stand. Stay seated. Becky laughed, light and unembarrassed. Then her attention narrowed, the reporter's lens clicking into place behind her eyes. From the top of the circle, she pointed. A clean vector. A white van tucked against a service alley, back doors kissing the fence, two figures moving with the fluid nonchalance of men counting beats in their heads. Beneath a street lamp, a third figure pivoted to watch the crowd. Harrison Ford, the squint unmistakable even from height, the mask tipping as if it smelled applause. With clipped clarity, Roger tracked the path down. They're staging the exit at the alley mouth. When the first volley hits, cover. The wheel lowered them like a blessing with a deadline. The bar popped, and they were moving before their feet had fully remembered the ground. The first fireworks thumped a red pulse into the sky. The air bore the clean-burned scent of powder and old carnival. The crowd's cheer lifted like a flock, then tumbled as the next report quaked the ribs. With urgency sharpened to a point, Becky shouldered through a knot at a barricade, badge up. NYPD, Roger barked, and they squeezed past a security guard who was close enough to feel their heat. With dry professionalism and a smirk he didn't quite swallow, the guard said, Flash your badges, not your feelings, but held the gate for them anyway. They sprinted along the service lane. Fireworks stitched gold thread across the dark. Sparks fell in gentle showers that never reached the ground. The band hit a chorus that sounded like a dare. The van's brake lights blinked. Roger cut left. Becky broke right, their angles drawing a net. With a commanding snap, Becky pointed down the throat of the alley. Cut them off at the exit! With reckless devotion that felt, even to him, like muscle memory newly discovered, Roger shouted back, "If you jump, I jump!" A vendor pushing a dolly stacked too high with cases of soda shoved past them with a grunt, so close Roger could read the faded logo on his shirt. "Jump over the dolly, Romeo!" he barked, but his mouth tipped into a grin as they vaulted the cart in perfect time. The fireworks escalated, white chrysanthemums exploding into red hearts, light painting faces with borrowed courage. The Harrison Ford mask saw them at the last second and bolted, juking right toward a gate that hung loose on one hinge. Roger lunged, fingers brushing a nylon sleeve. The star slithered free and clipped a stanchion. The mask's iconic squint swung wide, and for one ridiculous heartbeat, Roger imagined the real actor raising a single unimpressed brow. With breath burning and joy riding the edge of fear, Becky chased the second star, Jack Nicholson grin, into the narrower cut behind a merch tent, the lane slick with fry grease damp. The mask glanced at its own reflection in a dark window and seemed, impossibly, to admire itself. That vanity cost a step. With timing like a metronome, Dina appeared at the far end of the pinch, shoulders squared, cuffs ready, 3 strides away and closing. "Police, don't," she said, voice iron. The Nicholson mask juked left, right, misread the shine underfoot, and skated into Dina's reach. With professional efficiency and the relief that comes from a plan meeting a breath of luck, she pinned, turned, clicked one cuff, then the other. The mask breathed harder, the grin never changing. With triumphant breathlessness and laughter threading her words, Becky skidded to a stop, palms on her thighs. "I've never felt this way before." Dina cut her a look that said later, later, and now, both at once, then lifted the cuffed star by the elbow. "Go get the other 2, she said, and Becky was already moving. Roger chased Niro, the cool, wry half-smile, past the cotton candy stand where blue syrup bled into napkins like cartoon wounds, then through a gap between generator trucks where the air smelled like diesel and hot metal. Fireworks boomed overhead, each report a hand on the spine. The van's engine revved, the doors slammed. With a jump turn that would have earned him jeers in the academy, but felt right in his bones, Roger cut across the arc of the van's exit and slapped the palm of his hand against the driver's window. The driver startled. The van hesitated, then reversed a single car length with a squeal. Becky met it at the passenger side, notebook whacking her thigh like a metronome. The passenger door cracked, an elbow, then a shoulder, and the De Niro mask slid out with the eel grace of a man born to slip. With a last surge, Roger reached for the mask, fingers digging into the elastic. It snapped back against the man's cheek with a sting that would photograph beautifully. The star laughed, a low, mirthless sound, and ducked, then vanished into a seam between 2 tents where a tarp batted like a careless hand. A Roman candle wrote a green exclamation in the sky. They stood there for a single beat in the gust of the van's escape, chests heaving, powder smoke writing itself into their clothes. Under the neon of a snow cone sign, Becky put a hand to Roger's shoulder, grounding them both. With a grin that trembled and steadied, she caught his gaze. "We almost had him." With a rueful, bracing smile, he nodded. "We almost will," he said. Behind them, Dina frog-marched the cuffed Nicholson past the barricade toward a waiting unit. The crowd, too enthralled with the sky's choreography to notice, cheered on cue at the next bright bloom. The ride operator at the Ferris-wheel lifted a hand as if to honor a pact only 4 people understood. The security guard, still at his post, touched his radio and gave them a nod that meant he'd seen enough to believe. They regrouped under the edge of a tent where the air was a degree cooler and the world made a little more room for conversation. With breath still high in her chest and eyes lit by the residue of the chase, Becky let a soft, incredulous laugh out. "I've never felt this way before," she said again, as if testing the sentence for structural integrity. With a hand gentle at her elbow and purpose steady in his voice, Roger answered, "Good. Hold on to it. We're close." A drum roll scattered the air. A finale popped thunder over the river. The crowd screamed delight into the night. Two masks were still at large. One rode the back of a squad car. The city, teased and tested, readied itself for Act 5. The corner bakery on Nassau had glass polished to the moral clarity of a confession. Inside, the cases glowed with sugared geometry, cannoli lined like ordnance, baguettes stacked like lumber, croissants curled in buttery commas. Outside, pedestrians eddied and pressed, the afternoon thinning toward evening. Roger stood just inside the door, a paper bag in one hand, his badge pocketed, posture casual. Becky lingered inches from the window's edge, phone down, eyes up, reflection her accomplice. With a steady, quiet resolve that hummed beneath his voice, Roger tipped the bag and let the scent of warm bread rise. "Let's end this." With a conspirator's warmth, faith brightening her tone, Becky's eyes never left the glass. "We're meant to be." From arm's reach behind the case, the baker, flour to her elbow, tongs in hand, looked up, amusement softening her face. "You two are sweet. Buy a baguette or move," she murmured, not unkind, already sliding a loaf into a sleeve. The door chimed. In the window, a grin that didn't belong. Harrison Ford's squint tilted toward his own reflection, vanity pulling him that fatal inch closer. His shoulder bunched, his palm flattened to the glass. The second figure, a leaner build, the De Niro half-smile, hung back, eyes sweeping sightlines, strategy wearing a mask of nonchalance. With a breath that tightened into purpose, Roger's hand moved first, bag to counter, palm to badge, body pivoting. Becky stepped into the doorway, letting her silhouette break the reflection. The Ford mask flinched at being seen seeing himself. That hesitation was all Dina needed. With crisp, command-sure consonants, Dina cut in from the sidewalk's blind angle, woman-sized and fierce. "Police, don't move." Her hands found the mask's shoulder and wrist. A turn, a counterweight shift. Metal clicked. One cuff, then the other. The squint held. The man beneath it swore. With triumph curling into laughter at the edges of breath, Becky exhaled. "We've got one." The De Niro mask didn't wait to be invited to the next act. He snapped left, slid past a stroller, ducked a cab's honk, and vanished into Nassau's nervous stream. With a restrained growl rippling under control, Roger was already moving. "He's running for the exits," he said, and the city translated exits as concourses. In the departure hall, steel ribs arched like the inside of a whale. Rolling suitcases murmured their rubber hymns. Announcements feathered from speakers. The smell of coffee and fryer oil braided into transit's inevitable perfume. The De Niro mask skimmed the edge of Gate 27, boarding pass held like a truancy note. He kept his face angled at the glass. Even here, even now, he wanted the reflection. With the urgency of a sprint still in her lungs, yet a softness cutting through it, Becky closed the distance to Roger, shoulder brushing his forearm. "It was always you," she said, the admission arriving like weather no longer denied. With a low, unwavering warmth that steadied the moment, Roger answered, "You complete me." From 2 feet away, a business traveler with a laptop bag looked up mid-email, eyebrows climbing. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered, but his mouth tipped, traitorous, toward a smile. The leader sneered, the De Niro curl sharpening as he measured them with a veteran's contempt for third acts. With derision that tried to hide a thread of grudging respect, he rasped, "Get a room." With dry, unflinching humor, Becky didn't blink. "After we get your prints." An airport security officer, close enough to smell their adrenaline, stepped into the gap with a palm-out gesture that carried both courtesy and steel. "Save the banter for the bond hearing," she said, positioning herself between the leader and the jetway mouth. With practiced economy and the patience of a man who trusted procedure because procedure had held him up more nights than caffeine, Roger reached, turned, and set the leader's wrist against the soft pad of the stanchion. Dina, off the escalator in a streak of momentum, arrived at his elbow, cuffs ready. The mask twisted once, twice. The elastic snapped against cheekbone. The man hissed. The clicking of metal sounded like a key finishing its turn. With a breath that trembled into a laugh she couldn't, and didn't try to, stop, Becky watched the performative swagger deflate to the human weight of wrists together. Relief rolled through her like warm tide. With a tone that was calm, more than triumphant, Roger nodded to the officer. "We're done here." The officer thumbed her radio and stepped back a half pace, close enough to be there, far enough to let the scene breathe. The business traveler shook his head, typed 3 words, and smiled in spite of himself. They walked the leader toward the concourse's edge where the windows made day out of steel. He stared straight ahead, jaw locked, mouth still trying to have the last line it had already lost. The airport exhaled. The scoreboard flipped another list of cities. Somewhere a toddler laughed the way only toddlers do when everyone else is pretending not to pay attention. With a softness cut from granite, Becky touched Roger's sleeve. No grand gesture, just contact. The story had reached its hand into the ordinary and stitched it a little tighter. Night laid its palms on the city and pressed. On a mid-rise rooftop in the financial district, tar blisters caught starlight like small planets. Roger arranged candles in a loose constellation that made the brick parapet glow. Becky scattered rose petals with theatrical defiance of Cliche police. The boombox sat between them, chrome and black, VU meters awakening into polite green as the tape engaged. With a boyish pride warmed into reverence, Roger pressed play. Hiss, then synth, then the patient ache of an 80s chorus unfurling like a flag. Time after time poured the roof full of earnestness that had outlived 4 decades of eye rolls. With a laugh that let joy be gaudy, Becky slipped into his arms and guided them into a gentle orbit. Rain threatened in the distance and decided against it. Taxi horns rehearsed for a role they already owned. Somewhere below, a neighbor stepped onto his own sliver of roof with a beer, and realizing what show was on, lifted the bottle in salute rather than complaint. With his chin resting at her temple, voice low and even, Roger let silence carry most of what needed saying. The tape flipped. In Your Eyes arrived, anthemic and domestic at once. They danced slower. Candles guttered. Wind touched the flame and took only a little. With a contentment that felt like the opposite of a chase, Becky rested her cheek against his shoulder and closed her eyes. Morning wore the city's flannel. Becky woke to the smell of coffee and the cozy indecency of too much sugar in the air. Roger came in balancing a tray that would have embarrassed a subtler man. Heart-shaped pancakes stacked like cartoon clouds, a single rose in a juice glass, a bear the size of a grapefruit clutching a plush heart as if supervising. With goofy triumph that admitted every charge and begged for more, Roger set the tray across her lap. "Exhibit A," he said. "Breakfast. Exhibit B, poor judgment in bear procurement." From the other side of the wall, the neighbor's voice arrived muffled and amused, close enough to feel neighborly. "If you're going to weaponize pancakes, share with the building." With a delighted snort, Becky forked a corner of pancake and held it out. "Open and shut," she said, feeding him. They ate. They laughed. They planned their depositions with syrup on their tongues. The bear supervised. Later, they wandered to the cafe where everything had started saying the quiet part out loud. The bell chimed. Amir stood at the counter with a piece of cardstock he'd mounted like a junior high science fair winner, their stamp card, gold-starred, laminated. He tapped it with a knuckle. With mock solemn ceremony and warmth that meant it, he intoned, "Effective immediately, retiring the E for effort surcharge card. It's going on the wall." With a pleased, grateful laugh, Becky clapped once, softly. "We'll miss the fines," she said. With a grin that split the morning, Roger slid a $5 across the counter anyway. "Consider it back taxes." Amir shook his head, already pinning the card beside a faded photo of the cafe's opening day. "Consider it covered," he said. "Now what's it going to be? And please, for the love of foam art, order in unison." They did. They couldn't help it. And when they turned toward the sugar station, shoulders bumping, fingers colliding with the cinnamon shaker for the 1,000th time, nobody nearby groaned, not even a little. The city just kept moving, close enough to notice, close enough to be kind, and they, ridiculous and radiant in equal measure, kept saying what they meant in a language that had been waiting for them all along.